Welcome to the journey.
Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to The Journey with Drea. I am your host, Drea, and today we are going to talk about and touch on abandonment issues, and I am going to tell you all my story. I hope you will stay along for the journey. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate every single last one of you. I don't believe in wasting time, so let's get to it. My father was present for the first 5 years of my life. I don't really remember a lot about our home life. I do have some core memories that will forever be with me. One thing I knew for sure about him is he was definitely a protector. He may not have been a really good man to my mother, but even on his deathbed, I believed he would have laid down his life for her. For him, she was always the one that got away. Throughout the years, the early years, I'll say late elementary into junior high, there weren't very many visits, phone calls, spotty visits here and there, promises that he would pick me up. Most of the time he would be a no call, no show. And I remember being so angry with my mother when she would make me come to terms with the fact that he wasn't coming. And it really wasn't until my late teens that he became a full-time figure in my life. Probably around 17 or 18. I can remember the first time I ever became so angry at him that all of the things that I felt over the years kind of welled up in the back of my throat. And before I knew it, I was spewing out all of these terrible words about him making my mother do it on her own. And she'd been doing this shit by herself for many, many years. And how dare him tell her that he won't help her. And all of this was based around me taking my senior pictures. I remember it so vividly. And I remember after that having the attitude of going to him for money and not feeling guilty about it because I felt like he owed me. Today I find it really odd that even in his absence, when he was in my presence, he still had a way of making me feel like I was the apple of his eye, like that little blushing little girl who just loved her daddy. And when I look back, I can honestly say there was nothing in me that resented him or was angry at him for not being there. There was something about the way that he loved me that just wouldn't allow me to hold any resentment or hold him accountable. I guess in a sense, I really didn't understand how being abandoned by my father would affect me in my adulthood. I never really thought about how it would show up until I took a deep dive into all of my relationships, especially my romantic relationships and how they would play out. It's so funny to listen to these platforms where men talk about women with daddy issues and how women need to heal their daddy traumas without knowing how difficult of a task it actually is. I've never understood why it's so easy for me to walk away and why it was so easy for me to do a thing I call light switching my feelings, where I could literally feel a coldness inside my body before I could just switch them off. It created a numbness where warmth should be. I don't think people understand what it's like to desire security and love, and when you receive it, not know what to do with it. The only thing I knew to do was self-sabotage and run. It always seems so much easier for me to go ahead and end it before I allow myself to be hurt. However, there were times when I would allow myself to feel and would let my guard down to men and relationships and situationships when I should have actually ran like hell. It was such a confusing time because on one hand, I was being taught to be this strong, independent woman and not need a man. And on the other hand, I desired so deeply to be loved. Even with being abandoned by my father, I always knew that none of this shit, situationship, relationship, none of those were quote unquote proper. I just wanted to be loved. I remember the first time I actually fell in love with someone. I was a new mom. He was fresh out of prison. And for some reason, our relationship at the time, it just worked for both of us. I was so young and dumb, and he was institutionalized and routine. And somehow that provided me with a sense of security and balance. He kind of gave me the same feeling that my dad gave. The funny part is, I found out shortly after we started dating that he and my father actually had known each other for quite a while. And they both said the same thing about each other, how great each other were. I did everything in my power to try to hold on to this man with every fiber of my being, even considering converting to Islam, although at the time I was a devout Christian. I remember wanting to change everything about myself to fit the narrative of being his wife. For some reason, I had romanticized our relationship in my head to even us walking down the aisle together. At the time, I didn't know I was only romanticizing what the relationship represented and not what it really was. Hell, I had no idea what I was doing. I'll never forget as the relationship started to fizzle out and the communication became strained. That was the first time I felt that abandoned little girl stand up and cry. In the final phase of our relationship, he offered up an explanation of not knowing what he wanted and where he wanted to be. I remember he sent me a text message and told me to listen to the song Where I Want to Be by Donnell Jones. That was the best explanation of how he felt. I remember being so devastated. I cried for days. Because once again, I was alone. There was never a blueprint on how to navigate what I was feeling on the inside. The best way to describe it is like taking a shovel and digging a hole in the dirt and just leaving it wide open. And every time that wound was open, I sought the wrong type of attention. Whatever made me feel good in that moment is what I accepted. It didn't matter to me how many men I went through. I always assumed that eventually I would hit the jackpot. One of them was going to love me. I spent many, many years blaming him until one day I decided enough was enough. Part of tackling the father wound, I was forced to write a letter to myself, and shit, that had to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. You want to talk about tears, y'all? I did the ugly, ugly cry. There was snot. There was tears. I even think at one point I found myself fighting the air because I had to let out all of these words and all of these things, all of these pent up feelings, and they just came pouring out of me. I want to read you all a letter that I wrote to myself during that time, which was a practice that my therapist recommended. Dear little Drea, baby girl, you didn't deserve any of this when he left. He didn't know how to be your father because he didn't have a father in his life. In this life, you are going to make some choices formed around feeling abandoned. You will do everything in your power to make them see you and make them love you. Please know that this whole time you were worthy of the love you desired. You were worthy of every type of love that you desired. Your past choices will not define your happy ending. Baby girl, please know I will never leave you. I am still here, and I have saved you every time. You are wounded, but you are not broken. You have fought through the worst times and survived every time. This fight has never been with other people. It has always been with yourself. It is time for you to give yourself the validation you require. Open yourself up to be emotionally available to you. Protect your heart, but don't become the person who hurt you. Keep working. Keep pushing to be better. You will get there. I promise. Love, Big Drea. So my challenge for you all is to write a letter to that abandoned little girl or that abandoned little boy inside of you. I want you to tell them how much you love them. And I want you to tell them that they didn't deserve any of this. Let them know that you are here to nurture and heal them. And as always, it is my hope that my words will help someone on this journey. And I hope that you all will stay tuned in for more of my story. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been The Journey with Drea. Good night, you guys.
Welcome to The Journey.